Hello class, I wanted to do a quick video on how you can make a custom dialog for your Windows Form applications. So here I've created a generic Windows Form project. Here's my main form. And what I want to do is when I click a button or some event occurs, I want to make a dialog box that allows me to input data. A lot of students have asked me, how do you do this type of function, or is there a message box control that lets you do this? I'm going to show you how you can make your own. Okay, so here we have our generic form. I'm going to go ahead and put a button on this form, and we're going to make this button say you win. It's a win button. So when you win the game, we want the user to be able to enter their initials, but I want to spawn a dialog box to help the user do that. So why don't we put a label down here as well, and we will try to update this label with the user's, the winning user's initials. Okay, so to create my own custom dialog, first I need to add another form class to my project. I want my form to call another form. So up here I'm going to go to Project, add a class, and select, I'm going to create a new Windows Form class. And why don't I name this initials dialog? You can name it anything you want. And notice here in my Solution Explorer, I have another class, an initials dialog class. I have a design view for this new class, and I can go into the code and see this initials dialog form inherits from the form class, just like my main form does. My main form inherits from the form class. So it's just like building another form. So let's make my initials, this new form, look like a dialog box. Maybe I will change the text property of my dialog box to say enter initials, and then we will add a label to my dialog, and we'll make the label say the same thing. Please enter your initials. Center it here. We'll add a text box that will let the user enter their initials, and then we will add a button for submitting the initials. I'm going to make the button say submit, and we'll make it let's make it a little bit bigger here, and I'm going to shrink my window down, kind of try to make it look like it's supposed to be a dialog box. Okay, now I'm going to do some things in the code behind the scenes of this new form I'm creating. First, I'm going to register an event handler for my submit button, and so here I have a little event handler that will handle the button click. And what happens is, if I create this new form as a dialog, then I'm going to try to I want to set a dialog result property in my form that tells the form I'm done, and lets whoever called my form know that a good result was reached. So what I'm going to do is, in my constructor for my dialog box, I'm going to set this.dialog result property value to be something not okay. There's an abort option, a cancel, what else? No, none, etc. I'm just going to, we'll call it cancel. When we spawn our dialog, the default result that will be returned will be this cancel result. Then when the button is clicked, I can add some logic. I'm trying to get to a dialog result OK stopping point. So maybe I will say something like this: if the text box 1 text value, if I go back to my dialog form, here's my text box 1. If this text value is empty when the user tries to submit, I don't want that to be a good result. So if the result is equal to maybe an empty string, then then what I will do is we'll just do nothing. We'll ignore it. But otherwise, if it is not an empty string, I want to save the initials to some place on my form, and then set the dialog result value to be equal to dialog result OK. And we want to set the dialog result of this form. And spelling it right will help. Okay. Now I need to save the initials to some property of my dialog form. So up here I'm going to create a new property. So here's a custom property for our dialog form. I'm going to make this property public. It's going to hold string values. I'm just going to call it initials. And we'll just make it an auto implemented property. It has a get and set. And so in the event that the user did not enter nothing into the text box, I'm going to set my initials property to be equal to the text box 1 text value. So what are we doing here? I'm saving the initials into a property, and then we are going to set the dialog result value to be dialog result.ok. Okay. Save our work for a second. So we designed a simple form. The form has an input, a button. The button triggers an event handler method that checks to see that some value was entered into the text box, and if it does, I'm saving that value into this initials property. Okay, let's go back to the form. Now in our form 1, when we click the You Win button, I want to spawn this new dialog box that we just created, and hopefully get the value back into my form. So into my form 1 code, let's register an event handler for the You Win button. And what I want to do is I want to create this dialog form. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new dialog object. So initials dialog is the name of the class that I'm creating. So we'll call this custom dialog. How about? I can name this object anything I want, but its data type is initials dialog. So equals new initials dialog. We're creating an instance of this new form class that we just created. Okay. Now I'm going to write some logic that is similar to the logic we use in other dialogs. If this dialog form object that I created, .show dialog, returns with a dialog result OK value. So let's talk about this code here. Your form class has a show dialog method attached to it, and when you call that method, it's going to spawn another version of the form. It's going to kind of show that form as a dialog, and when you exit the form, it is going to return some dialog result value. And what we've done is we set the code up to say that the default value that will be returned is this cancel result, but if the button was clicked and we have a good text value entered, we're going to change that dialog result to show that it's okay. So in the event that our show dialog method returns the dialog result OK value that we set, then hopefully the initials property of that form has been set. So I'm going to say label1.text is equal to the, let's put some text here, high score winner, and we'll add the custom dialog dot initials property value. So I'm going to grab the initials property value from my dialog form object and append it to my label text, but only if the dialog result is OK value is returned. All right, so not a lot of code here. If we go into my dialog itself, or calling the dialog, that's not a lot of code. Let's run it and see if it works. So we'll hit start here, create an instance of our form. There's the You Win button. When I click on the You Win button, it spawned this dialog. So here's our second form object that we created. And if I hit cancel, or the X button here on this new form that was spawned, notice the label wasn't updated because the dialog result.cancel value was returned. But if I click the UN button and I do enter some text and hit submit, now that value is passed back and I get it into my form. So hopefully this gives you an idea of how you can build your own custom dialogues inside C#.